This is what I wish I knew. 5 things I wish I knew about traveling and living in different places now that I have done a road trip across the USA for 2.5 years and traveled and lived in dozens and dozens of cities, and also traveled across the world for 1 year doing a gap year. So I wish I knew these things because I think it's very important that I knew about these things. I think it would have wasted me less time. I would have worried less. I wouldn't have stressed or optimized as much. And yeah, I think it's also some things that can teach you about fulfillment and meaning and all that, because there was some very meaningful stuff that I accomplished during my time traveling, having come from a place where I couldn't travel much. So first things first, it's gonna be okay. It seems very scary, and sure, there are dangers and risks. You know, driving to a new city or state you know nothing about, maybe the neighborhood you stay in, you've never even gotten close to there, and then when you drive into the Airbnb or hotel you're staying, you arrive late at night because it was a 7-hour drive, and then it seems kind of sketchy outside. There are things that can kind of be tough, but if you're smart about it and you play it safe, it's okay. And it's not going to be as scary as you make it out in your mind. I think I was scared of a lot of things. First one was some type of safety. It didn't make logical sense, but unconsciously, emotionally, it made sense. It's like, okay, what are I'm choosing to stay in Airbnbs. I'm not like sleeping out on the streets or in a car. And you know, the places are pretty well reviewed, but you never know. Sometimes it feels scary because you've never been to these places. Sometimes they don't have time to research the neighborhood or area of this place, but the reviews look good. I did at least get good reviews. And then once you're locked in the house, like, you're safe, right? You're not out on the streets. You're not going to be killed or murdered or robbed, but it can definitely feel that way. So first big thing is just realize it's going to be okay as long as you make smart, safe moves, which I did. Nothing really bad is going to happen. I think I stressed a bit too much about that, and that's something that's pretty wild to think about. And then world travel in some ways was less scary, which is kind of funny. Depends on the country. Sometimes it was still scary, but I don't know, there's definitely parts of the USA where I went to where I was a bit more scared, versus if you're going to Italy and you're going to like the big cities like I did, Rome, Florence, or London or Paris. Those places were like, okay, it's like, that's not scary. It's like a major tourist city. There's all this activity. It looks cleaner than a lot of, you know, US cities like New York. So I didn't actually feel that bad, but sometimes I did when I was all the way on the other side of the world and I was in a new city for the first time, especially my first ever solo trip to the Philippines. But I'll roll in like a bonus tip to this first one. Get out there and enjoy and interact with people, socialize. I found that when I was in my head, it was because I got to the hotel and I was surrounded by these 4 walls, isolated, just kind of scared, and it just made me more isolated and building up in my head how dangerous it was. But then when I got out of the house and I started talking to people, looking around, socializing, I was like, this isn't too bad. This is actually pretty nice. The people here are friendly. But yeah, I distinctly remember that because I had a long flight, like 30 plus hours, multiple connections from US to Philippines. And I made this mistake of starting in this super small remote island on my trip, which takes longer and more flights to get to. And by then I just wanted to sleep, but then I was taking a nap in my room in the hotel, in this tiny little hotel, because I wanted to save money, and the room barely fit me as a person to sleep, and I'm just like super isolated. Then I got out and I went to basically see what was out there. And I walked around. I went to this mall in this local Filipino town, and it was nice there. I even ran into a couple Americans I talked to, and I was like, this isn't too bad. It was mostly people I didn't know, Filipinos, but it was scary. But when it happened again and again, like when I was in Poland, I lived in Poland for 2 months. Everyone was white and Polish. There's barely any other ethnic groups there. But it was okay. I was like, yeah, I was nervous at first, but I told myself I've done it before. I'll do it again. Second big thing. You'll notice I'm walking around right now in Long Beach, California. And second big thing is fulfillment of travel. I think it was something where I was very wanted to do for many years, and I ended up not having a chance to travel in my 20s much, other than like 2-week vacations. Some years I wouldn't take that vacation to work more, and so I just couldn't. I found a job in Maryland where I was born and raised. I wanted to leave the state for college and for work, but it was just very hard then to do so. You have an advantage in state, but when they hear you're out of state, they're just like, no, we're not gonna do it. You have to relocate. Oh my gosh, no. So that was it. Like, I didn't really travel much, and I thought this was gonna be my life for the rest of my life. Even though I really loved traveling, from what I could tell and what I saw on social media, I was like, this is great. Like, I want to travel like this. But I basically decided this was not possible for me, and I found my happiness living and working in Maryland. Ultimately, what happened was pandemic happened, and with a remote job, I got more opportunities. Not too many more, but enough. And through that, I got a couple chances to essentially travel because I got a remote job. It didn't just pop in my lap, but during the pandemic, I started hunting for other jobs, and long and short of it, I got a problem, which was my existing company. They weren't really happy to have me anymore. I had plateaued with my learning, and they weren't happy with my work. They wouldn't fire me, but they moved me they shunted me to a sales job, and it was like a cold email type of job. Not really sales, but I was cold emailing. And that wasn't the work I had signed up to do at the company. I wanted to do more digital marketing stuff, and it pushed me out of my comfort zone. I was very deep in my comfort zone. But the point is, it's worth it. There's more to life out there. It's fulfilling. You never know what's going to happen in your life, but try and take that leap of faith. And I did. I got a remote job after a lot of networking and applying to jobs for like 3+ months. It was very hard. There were times I felt like I wasn't getting anywhere, but eventually, through a networking informational interview, I got a referral to this company. They happened to work remote, 200 employees, but I was the only one who was like, well, do I have to work remote from the place I live, or can I like travel around the USA and work remote from there and just keep bouncing around like a digital nomad? This was always my dream. I thought most remote workers wanted that, but like almost all the other employees were just living and working where they already lived, because I guess they had houses and kids and stuff, but it just seemed to be a huge waste. And it also was a realization that most people are not like this. They take they have what they have, and this whole traveling thing just seems too far-fetched for them. And those who actually end up traveling the world and being a digital nomad, they're a certain breed. They believe it's possible, they make it happen, and it's rarer than you think. All these people at my company, 200, they could have worked remote and traveled, but there's always excuses. You know, I asked some of them and they're like, oh yeah, I was gonna do that, but then I bought a house, or this and that. And so there's always some excuse or something that prevents you, and that just means they don't really want it bad enough. So it was worth it. That was the second big thing. Take that big leap, make it worth it. It seemed outrageous at the time, not just to me, but to some of my friends and family. But they were supportive enough to let me do it, which I appreciated. They didn't block me. And I put all my stuff in the car and I started driving. It was super scary. But man, if you've seen my Instagram or some of my other YouTube videos, I've been to some of the most orangey yellow canyons, the most picturesque blue and orange beaches, green and light green swamps, white and yellow sand dunes. I've seen it all. I'm still continuing my adventure. I'm here in Long Beach visiting my sister, and this place looks so different with the hilltops and the way the cars incline and decline, and it's so peaceful here. And then you compare that to like New York City, where it's super harsh, kind of poor. Like they're paying probably a lot more than here, but they're getting a lot less for it. The cost of living is just insane there. And I lived in New York City for like 3 months, trying out different boroughs. I tried out Queens, Upper West Side, I tried out Brooklyn, and man, this is such a chill neighborhood in comparison. So it's super exciting and super blessed to do all this. And I knew there was more to this world than just, you know, the same old with this kind of boring suburban neighborhood with nothing that much remarkable about the nature there, but just didn't seem possible. So then the third tip I have for you is let's go this way. Third tip I have for you is pay attention to where you want to live, but don't over optimize and over analyze. As you might have noticed, I'm more of a anxious, neurotic type. I'm trying to reduce that, and with all that freedom came another big issue, which is, well, you start to think, what if I lived here? What if I lived there? Or if you're in one place, you're like, well, maybe there's a better place. There's a principle and a book written about this called The Paradox of Choice, where having more choices actually makes you feel worse, because you're always thinking maybe there's something better out there. Instead, if it's good enough, it's good enough. Stop thinking about it and then just move on. I mean, take here right now, Long Beach, California. There's these very beautiful colored houses. That one's blue, that one's a light salmon. Very nice, peaceful area to live. Not that crazy, traffic's not that great. You got palm trees, the weather's nice. But then there's infinitely other choices. Well, I could also be in Colorado, I could be in Florida, I could be in Miami, I could be in Seattle, Portland. All of them have their pros and cons, and then it's always like, well, maybe there's something better out there. Maybe I want to see this, and maybe I'm wasting my time in here. And so you can get super overwhelmed, but just like I said, I've learned the hard way. Just pick one and just deal with it. There is no perfect. I found pros and cons to every possible place I've been, but I guess my point is realize there's no perfect, just good enough, and then pick one of them and then try it out. If it doesn't work, people think they're stuck there forever, but in reality, you can just move. I'm actually now getting a remote job that's now hybrid, which means I have to come into the office like 3 days a week. So what does that mean? Well, say goodbye to my remote flexibility. Yeah, long and short of it, this is just how it is. I had to get another job, and in some ways I feel relieved. I don't have to deal with this FOMO, and I'm forced to live there, and I don't have to think about it anymore. This is where I have to live. That said, I feel like if you really want to live somewhere, you can make it happen. So sometimes I still think, here I'm just visiting Long Beach, but I'm like, this place is pretty nice. Maybe this is the place I want to be. You got little houses, not much grass, but like, you're close to a beach. The weather's not too hot like Las Vegas. But everything has its pros and cons, it's not that cut and dry. And ultimately, stop worrying about it, just pick one, and it's probably better than where you started off. Okay, we're on to number 4. Fourth thing I wish I knew is the world is truly an incredible, amazing place, and there is more to life for you than what you have. And to achieve that, you have to seize it to a degree. I think I've had a lot of friends and peers and co-workers, and I think, as hinted at, they're just kind of more chill and they kind of stay within the status quo. But because I've done some crazy things, and in the grand scheme of things, they're not even that crazy. It's like a gap year. Okay, Europeans take that all the time. But I took mine in my 30s. So that's a bit odd. Or just like driving around the country, traveling remote. Once I started doing it, no one was like, stop doing that, don't do it. No one blocked me. And then they were like, oh, that's really cool, or that's cool. And they would be like, oh yeah, that's just Will, that he's doing that, and sounds pretty cool. Sounds like the life. But yeah, I feel like I just know some of them in like my shoes with their personality, they wouldn't have done it. They would have played it safe, and they would have just found a place that they were living already. And like my other co-workers, they would have just worked from home, even if they wanted to, or they felt like they could have done this. It would have just been too scary for them, and it would have been outside their safe zone. So you don't necessarily have to be a super crazy adventurous person. I wouldn't say I'm a daredevil, skydiver, but I've done some things that are a bit out of the box, and it paid off. I've seen so many beautiful things. I've been to the pyramids of Giza in Egypt. I've been to the beaches of Philippines and Indonesia. I've been to the temples of Korea and Japan. I've been to the royal castles of Poland. I've been to the Vatican in Italy, and so on and so forth. And yeah, there's like a passage in Shoe Dog, a book by the founder of Nike, where before he starts Nike and like after college, he goes on his own gap year, and it's this crazy wild adventure that was similar to mine. And when I read that, I was like, I want to do something crazy like that. And it really inspired him. When he was in Athens, which I went to as well, that's when he saw Nike, the goddess of victory, I believe, and that's how he decided to name Nike. And while I was on my journey to travel around the world, it's funny because I literally encountered that book in a bookstore. I flipped to that passage and I read it again, and I was like, you know, I've outclassed him. His gap year was really like 6 months or 7 months, and he wasted like the first 3 or 4 blowing all his money in Hawaii, and then just ending up living in Hawaii as a door-to-door salesman with his buddy to, you know, make ends meet. And they had hit their comfort zone as well, and they were both on the verge of just like staying in Hawaii for the rest of their lives. His buddy had found a girlfriend there, and that was like where they're headed. But then Phil, the author of the book, he, like I said, pushed past his comfort zone, and he was like, no, I gotta see this through. And so he went on this gap year travel journey, which was also not just an excuse to travel, but also to get himself to Japan so he could pitch this like business deal with these shoemakers in Japan. So what a fascinating story that had some parallels to mine. So you just got to do it. Put yourself out there. Obviously, yeah, you will hear stories of like people dying on their travels, so there's a risk, but honestly, in a lot of ways, many countries are safer than the USA. So you just have to be smart about it, and you'll reduce your risk. Okay, 5th one. This one may be the most important and meaningful one ever, because I've seen so much, and I was inspired to do this video while walking because it just meant so much to me to see this beautiful place of Long Beach, to walk around, to experience it, and to be here, to be so lucky to see all that you see in front of you, all that you all you see in front of you right now. It's something I dreamed about. I never thought I'd be in California. I always wanted to. It seemed like one of the best states to live in, with the weather and everything. And as a kid, it represented to me a lot of the things that I wish I had, or seemed to be a paradise when I was growing up. Like, oh, that's where all the YouTubers are, good quality of life, good weather, beautiful women, easy, calm pace of life. Not many, what you would call it, issues. So the 5th tip, the 5th thing I wish I knew is realize that things are going to be okay no matter what. Sounds counterintuitive, but what I mean is that you can find happiness inside. Even when I was in Maryland, I wasn't sad or depressed, although there were trying times where I wasn't happy with my life. I was struggling, but I still found happiness eventually, because I knew from the research I'd done, the science, the books I read, that happiness comes not from pleasure-seeking things like the fancy car or possessions you get, or money, or women, or something like that, but from within, as well as, you know, strong friendships, community, health, giving back, purpose. These are things that you can have regardless of the place. And I came to that through a very dark period of my life. Now, it lasted about 2 to 3 years, maybe more, after college, where I was struggling to find a job. And then I was stuck in Maryland and just unhappy with a lot of things that had occurred. And so I turned to, you know, religious texts. I also turned to scientific books, and I found some answers. After some really bad books on the science of happiness, I found some good ones. And it truly helped me understand what actually matters towards feeling happy and content. And I bring this up because you may be thinking, wow, that would be the life. If I could travel around the world, travel around the USA, see these beautiful palm trees, something that I didn't rarely ever saw where I lived on the East Coast. And it just sounds so amazing. And that's what brings happiness and joy. I would say it brings some pleasure and excitement and interest to my life. And it's very exciting and arguably a bit fulfilling, but it does not solve everything in my life. It alone cannot bring happiness. And even now, in a couple weeks, I'll be forced to end my remote job and return to office at a new job in New Jersey, Hoboken, New Jersey, close to New York City. And I have to say goodbye to this beautiful landscape of palm trees, chill living, decent weather, although it's getting a bit hot, decent weather. And it's just chill, clean, at least compared to the New York City, New Jersey area. Man, some of those people are paying, like I said, way much more in rent, and they're living in tiny quarters. It's dirty on the outside, it's cramped on the inside, there's homeless people, there's smog in the air. And in some ways it sucks. In others it's better, because you do get the whole fact that New York City has a better girl-guy ratio for men. But the whole thing is still very, I would say, very much still a challenge for me, because why can't we all just live somewhere nice, which we can afford, with good weather, where dating isn't a challenge and all this stuff? But at the end of the day, I don't think my message is about just keep pursuing it until you live this luxury life where you're traveling all the time. No, I think my message is you make the most of your life, doing it however you can to make it more interesting, fulfilling, and happy. And for me, that meant being happy and finding that happiness in Maryland when I couldn't travel. It meant once I could travel with my remote job, but only within the USA, I made the most of that and I traveled. But I also didn't use it to depend on my happiness. And I traveled within my means. When I was traveling abroad, across the world, I often stayed at hostels, unless I was in a very cheap country like Vietnam, where I could afford my own place. And the point of that is, when you are traveling and you are out there doing your own thing, it's one of those things where you are traveling around and you are making it, but it's not always luxurious. I was staying in hostels, bunk beds with 7, 8 other people. Sometimes they would snore very loud. Sometimes they'd be awake at night. Sometimes this and that. But there's also a lot of good memories, social events, things where I met different people at hostels, and it was fun. So there's good and bad to it, but you make the most of it. And I guess, as the Buddha says, life is suffering, but it doesn't have to be. I think his point is that you're bound to face constant challenges in life. And as I close one chapter, I start another. And that chapter has an ending too. And then our life has an ending. So we want to make the most of it. And so when it comes to our time in New York and New Jersey that's coming up, I'm basically going to do a thing where I make the most of it by simply finding happiness, finding a place I can afford that's not a monstrously long commute, that's semi-clean and semi-spacious. It's not going to be as open and good weather and cloudless as here right now in Long Beach, but that's okay. New York has its own other benefits, and it's what we have to accept and deal with, and we will. And we'll find happiness not in the clouds or the weather or the tourist activities. We will find it in the friendships we make there, the community, the purpose, the fulfillment, the learning. Some people love it in New York. They wouldn't want to live anywhere else. It's very subjective. And if I hate it, I just move on. I quit the job, I go back to traveling on savings, or I find another job. If I don't like the city, I can always move. So it truly is not the end of the world. But to wrap it up, I think it definitely gets me thinking, because this is a meaningful moment where my travels are coming to an end, at least for now. The future is unknown, and it's going to be an interesting time where I have to go back to basically making the most of what I can afford and finding happiness there, even if it's not necessarily in travel anymore, because I can't. I have to come into the office, and even if this city or cost of living or situation is not going to be optimal, realize that we all are living in situations where it's not optimal, and we just have to make the most of them. So thank you. I'll see you in the next video.